Ladies and gentlemen, good day. Welcome to today's in-depth observation. I am Tang Jingyuan. The topic we are discussing today is one that has the entire global political and economic community holding its breath. A Trump-Xi summit, originally scheduled for late March, was expected to serve as another potential turning point in the U.S.-China trade war. Yet the current situation has suddenly become profoundly uncertain due to two unanticipated earthquakes. The first earthquake occurred in Zhongnanhai, Beijing. Rumors are circulating that two of Xi Jinping's closest and most trusted military heavyweights, Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli, have reportedly fallen. This is far more than a routine personnel adjustment. It is widely interpreted as a fatal warning sign that the regime has entered a countdown phase. The second earthquake took place in Washington. A ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court superficially removed one of President Trump's most convenient legal instruments for imposing sweeping global tariffs. In reality, however, this decision may mark merely the beginning of a tactical reconfiguration of Trump's tariff strategy. Today, we will depart from these two epicenters and dissect the underlying power logic and legal maneuvering behind this unfolding drama. We begin with the extremely brutal power purge currently underway inside Zhongnanhai. In recent weeks, the political atmosphere in Beijing has reached an almost surreal level of strangeness. The single most shocking detail, one that made many observers' eyes pop out, was a uniform omission by the Communist Party's flagship mouthpiece People's Daily and the official Xinhua news agency. In their February 22nd reports on congratulatory messages from world leaders to Xi Jinping for the Lunar New Year, both outlets conspicuously and synchronously forgot to include Xi's most critical title, Chairman of the Central Military Commission. In the hyper-rigid and protocol-obsessed bureaucratic system of the Chinese Communist Party, this was absolutely not a mere layout error or careless oversight. Such a synchronized, behind-the-scenes slight sends an extremely powerful signal. Has Xi Jinping's structural control over the military already begun to fracture? What is the Stalin logic? Stanford University scholar Wu Guoguang has put forward a highly precise concept, the Stalin logic. Xi Jinping's current mode of exercising power has fallen completely into this deadly cycle of perpetual purges. In order to maintain absolute centralization, he must continuously identify, fabricate, and eliminate enemies. Step 1. Purge political rivals. We have witnessed this clearly over the past decade. Step 2. Purge potential challengers and disobedient allies. Step 3. And the most terrifying phase is purging one's own inner circle. Who is Zhang Youxia? He is Xi Jinping's childhood friend, a man she could literally entrust with his back, a hardcore military loyalist who has protected and escorted him for years. If even figures like Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli, deeply entrenched in the military for decades and with major battlefield and career achievements, are now being taken down, this indicates that Xi Jinping has entered an extreme state of paranoia and suspicion. There's a widespread commentary in overseas Chinese circles stating that Zhang Youxia's fall is not good news for Xi Jinping. Rather, it is a death summons. Some argue that arresting Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli demonstrates Xi's overwhelming power and invincibility. Who could possibly challenge him now? On the surface, it may appear so, but the reality is far more dangerous. After arresting Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli, an even broader and more thorough purge is almost inevitable. The PLA Senior Officer Corps has already been decimated through multiple rounds of cleansing and counter-cleansing. Once Zhang Youxia is removed, the purge is expected to extend downward to division and corps-level officers. Virtually every senior field grade and general grade officer will be subjected to investigation. Under such conditions, how can the military maintain combat readiness or conduct meaningful training, let alone fight a war? Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli spent decades cultivating extensive personal networks within the armed forces. Xi Jinping, by contrast, has long been unpopular and lacks genuine prestige among the troops. What will happen to the officers and units loyal to Zhang and Liu? They will immediately think, next it will be me. I'm going to be finished. What should I do? Will these military professionals choose a mutually assured destruction path? The current situation inside the PLA is therefore extremely unstable, and by extension, the entire country is highly volatile. Zhang Youxia was once so close to Xi, protected him at all costs, and yet this is his fate. Before him, Wang Qishan, Liu Yuan, and even Hu Jintao were used and then discarded. After seeing this pattern, who would still be willing to risk everything and loyally serve Xi Jinping to the end? When things reach an extreme, they inevitably reverse. Xi Jinping currently appears to be slaughtering in all directions, but in truth he is surrounded by crises on every side. He'll become distrustful of everyone around him, suspicious of shadows, and in the end, even if no one actually moves against him, he may collapse under the weight of his own paranoia. When Mao Zedong's closest comrade-in-arms Lin Biao fell, Mao visibly aged overnight and his health deteriorated rapidly. The Lin Biao incident effectively accelerated Mao's death by several years. Xi Jinping faces a similar, but more severe, situation. He lacks Mao's historical prestige, has committed numerous blunders that are widely ridiculed behind closed doors, and has exhausted himself in endless power struggles in order to secure lifelong rule. His physical and mental health have both been severely damaged. At present, many observers believe Kai Chi is the most dangerous figure because he holds the greatest power and therefore poses the greatest potential threat to Xi. Kai could replace Xi at any moment. Does she not have to guard against him? The entire regime structure under Xi Jinping is now riddled with holes. Forget the military for a moment. How many high-ranking party and government officials are genuinely willing to follow him to the end? That is already a huge question mark. Meanwhile, the economy is in deep distress with problems piling up. How will they be resolved? How will the party state prolong its life? The international environment is also shifting dramatically against Beijing's interests. Trump is actively reshaping the global order, isolating the CCP and fracturing the so-called axis of evil. Venezuela has collapsed. Iran and Cuba are in acute danger, and Putin has always pursued his own agenda. How can Xi Jinping respond to all of this? How much longer can he hold on? If Zhang Youxia can fall, will Li Youxia or Ma Youxia appear next? These are existential questions for Xi. Therefore, although Zhang Youxia's downfall does not directly end the Xi era, it is unquestionably a death summons, a clear signal that the Xi dynasty has entered its twilight and is now on the countdown. While Zhongnanhai descends into chaos, Washington delivered what initially appeared to be good news for Xi Jinping. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that President Trump may not invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping global tariffs. For a moment, Beijing think tanks and official media were jubilant, believing Trump had lost his most powerful bargaining chip ahead of the late March negotiations. However, a careful reading of serious professional analysis reveals that this optimism is entirely misplaced. On February 22nd, veteran Taiwanese financial advisor Zhao Kunqing published an analysis pointing out that the Supreme Court ruling was extremely precise. It only found that the invocation of the statute was improper. It never declared the tariffs themselves unreasonable. In plain terms, the court told Trump, "You cannot use this master key to open every door." So what did Trump do? He immediately switched to 3 sharper, more specialized keys. The first key is Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Almost immediately after the Friday ruling, Trump issued a proclamation invoking this long-dormant provision, which allows the president, without congressional approval, to impose tariffs of up to 15% in cases of international balance of payments disequilibrium. Friday, Trump announced a 10% global tariff. Saturday, Trump posted on Truth Social, raising it directly to 15%. The second key is Section 301. This remains the most powerful and procedurally robust trade weapon currently available. USTR Jamison Greer is already conducting investigations into unfair trade practices. As economists have noted, once these Section 301 procedures are completed, the resulting tariffs acquire extremely strong legal footing and become very difficult to challenge or repeal. The third set of keys consists of Section 232, National Security, and Section 201, Import Surges. Treasury Secretary Bessent has already stated clearly that when these strengthened legal authorities are combined, tariff revenue in 2026 is expected to remain virtually unchanged. Scholars at the Peterson Institute for International Economics have pointed out that this legal pivot is actually more unfavorable to China. If the United States applies significantly lower tariff reductions to Southeast Asian countries than to China, the relative tariff burden on Chinese goods in the U.S. market will rise, further eroding their competitiveness. Thus, while Beijing believed Trump had lost his sledgehammer, it failed to notice that he had already sharpened several precision surgical scalpels, ready to perform far more targeted incisions at the negotiating table. Now, let us weave these two threads together and examine the summit scheduled for late March. How much leverage does Xi Jinping still have? Beijing's current calculation is to exploit the apparent legal constraints on Trump and adopt a tougher posture in the talks. Martin Korzempa, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute, notes that the Supreme Court ruling may significantly alter the effective tariff structure facing different countries. If tariff reductions for other nations, especially Southeast Asia, are substantially larger than those applied to China, the relative tax disadvantage for Chinese products in the American market will increase. On the afternoon of February 22nd, the CCP-affiliated outlet Yuantianxian stated that China does not rule out making assessments and adjustments based on actual developments. Should the U.S. continue imposing new tariffs through other legal instruments, China will evaluate corresponding countermeasures. According to a February 22nd South China Morning Post report, Renmin University professor Shi Yinhong indicated that while the Supreme Court decision weakens one of Trump's trade tools against China, it does not automatically grant Beijing greater advantage at the upcoming summit. Beijing must demonstrate both the capacity and willingness to make certain concessions so that Trump can package them as a success story. Reuters reported that Xi Jinping's primary objective is to persuade Trump to downplay support for Taiwan. He may offer an upgraded purchase package of soybeans, Boeing aircraft, and energy products in an attempt to revive the transactional model of Trump's first term. However, the landscape today is fundamentally different. Xi Jinping now faces Trump backed by a China with unstable military morale, severe economic contraction, and a passive, dispirited bureaucratic apparatus. Trump, meanwhile, is actively reordering the international system, isolating the CCP, and fracturing the so-called axis of authoritarian states. The turmoil in Venezuela, the crises in Iran and Cuba, and Putin's independent calculations all leave Xi increasingly isolated on the global stage. Hudson Institute scholar Miles Yu, Gonside, argues that although Beijing may threaten to cut off rare earth supplies, the marginal utility of such threats continues to diminish. While the Chinese side may perceive Trump's leverage as weakened, this misperception could lead to serious miscalculations during negotiations. Professor Shi Yinhong sees the situation even more clearly. Even if American leverage appears diminished on paper, China will not automatically gain the upper hand. Beijing must show it is capable of making significant concessions substantial enough for Trump to present them domestically as a clear victory. The critical question is this: having fully entered the Stalin logic, does Xi Jinping still possess either the capacity or the willingness to make the kind of substantive concessions that would genuinely defuse American anger? Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing a historic inflection point. Xi Jinping's current predicament bears a striking resemblance to Mao Zedong after the fall of Lin Biao. Although Mao won the power struggle, he suffered a devastating mental and physical collapse that hastened the end of his era. Today, the fall of Zhang Yoxia may very well accelerate the disintegration of the Xi dynasty. On one side stands Trump, relentlessly pursuing, through legal and economic means, the encirclement and containment of Beijing. Despite judicial setbacks, his determination to reshape the global order via tariffs remains unshaken. On the other side stands Xi Jinping at the apex of power, yet profoundly alone and fearful. He has turned every close confidant into a potential enemy and transformed every institution into an instrument of purge. When he sits at the negotiating table at the end of March, he will not only face Donald Trump across from him, he must also constantly guard against the subordinates who forget to write his military title, and against the ever-present risk of a military mutiny of mutually assured destruction. Zhang Youxia's death summons may already foretell the outcome of this great contest. Thank you for watching today's program. I will continue to follow and report on the March summit and on how the U.S. Treasury Department will implement concrete tariff substitutions through Section 301 and related authorities. If you have any thoughts or comments on today's content, please feel free to leave them in the discussion section below.